Welcome back to another episode of the Redeemed Man podcast. I'm Nate Dewberry, part of the team here. And today I'm so excited to welcome to the show Coach Frank Rich. Welcome to the show, man.
Nate, honored to be here, brother. Excited to dive in.
Frank leads and is the founder of Rebuilt Recovery. And I'd love, as we start out, if you would just tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing and kind of the heartbeat of Rebuilt Recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Rebuilt Recovery was an organization that I started in May of 2020. And it really birthed out of a mission to share my journey through porn addiction, but really what God was doing in my life once I got on the other side of it. So I struggled for 20 plus years with porn addiction and found real freedom in February of 2019. And about 6 months after that, my life had radically changed. I talk about this veil of pornography being removed from a man's life, how I think getting porn out of a life can be a red pill moment for many people. And that's what that experience in those first 6 months of freedom really was to me. It changed the way I saw the world. It changed the way I saw people. It changed the way I saw myself. And at the time, I looked at the landscape of podcasting and media, and there weren't a whole lot of people talking about what the experience like was on the other side. A lot of it was shame-based. A lot of it was guilt-based. And I said, this wasn't my experience. And I felt a calling at the time to at least start sharing some conversations, both about my journey, but then also hosting other people that had overcome trials and tribulations. And we were very fortunate in that first summer of 2019 when I launched the first podcast, The Superman Life. Like I said, there weren't a lot of conversations. There weren't a lot of episodes and shows that were highlighting men's struggles and coming at it from what I believe is a different angle. And that's what we've always tried to do. So the show got picked up pretty quickly. Apple recognized us. They put us on their front page of New and Noteworthy at the time. So we got a lot of early traction, which I'm very grateful and fortunate. But at the time, Nate, I was deep into running a marketing agency. We were doing a lot of great work on the Facebook ad side of things and building sales funnels. So I never got into this from a place of monetization or starting a whole nother career path. But after about 6 months, my inbox was blowing up with guys that were resonating with the conversation. I think they saw a lot of themselves in me. We speak to high performers. We speak to guys that are leaders in business, leaders in personal development, because that was my journey. So guys saw themselves in me. And about 6 months in or so of the show, the messages started to flood my inbox. Frank, we need some help. Can you help us out of this? And at the time, Nate, I didn't feel qualified to do that. Yeah. I was a fitness guy. I was a bodybuilder. I was an entrepreneur. So what in what way do I have to help somebody out of porn addiction? But once again, I followed a call that I felt God was pushing me to. And, in January of 2020, I attended a marketing conference. They taught a little hack on how to kind of start an online business. And I said, let me just see what can come out of this. And I remember, Nate, the first two clients paid me, and I told them, I don't have a way to help you, but we'll work with this together. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back. Well, what was amazing is those two first guys that we worked with, lives radically changed in like 4 months. And it's cool because I still keep in touch with them today, but they were really the foundation. And by the end of that first cycle, we had brought on a few more clients. And by July of 2020, I left the marketing agency and I went all in on Rebuilt Recovery, which now I've kind of really dialed in what we do. I say we are the world's first and only fully integrated, holistic approach to porn addiction based on growth-centric principles. So we are rooted in faith. I'm a man of faith. So our curriculum is biblically backed, but we come at it from a lens of faith, neuroscience, traditional behavioral psychology, and integrating this all together. Today, now we have communities, we have various curriculums. Our kind of core curriculum is Reboot Your Life. It's a 12-week, what I say, life transformation. So we try to shy away from traditional recovery approaches and seeing things through the lens of addiction, more about identity transformation. So how do we become a guy that can walk in freedom? How do we transcend this old identity that's maybe kept us in a victim, shame-rooted identity? So long-winded kind of answer here. It's been a 6-year journey of building curriculums. We have an incredible, thriving community, assistant coaches that are working inside of what we're building here. But we're really once again, based on providing guys with the tools and frameworks to transcend their old identity and step into a rebuilt version of themselves, what we would say is the identity that God is calling you to be.
I love to hear more about that. I want to shift back to your own journey. We'll unpackage a lot more about what you guys are doing, but just want to comment on what you talked about, that identity approach, because I think personally that is what drastically changed and transforms, changed my own journey of how I see myself and what that looks like of my view and how that impacts what things you're willing to go to and places you're willing to be because of how you look at yourself and the shame that can come and rooted in that. But going back to your own journey, tell me a little bit about how you found yourself at that place of addiction, and then what became your own catalyst for transformation of going, oh, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, man. You know, on one lens, Nate, I'm very grateful that I, was born in 1983 and not 2003 or 2013.
Yeah.
With all that, I did stumble on to pornography at a very, very young age. I was 6 years old, snooping through dad's sock drawer and found some pretty hardcore material at a very young age. And, I've been able to unpack like why it led me down the path of addiction, because it was something that nobody prepared me for.
Yeah.
It made me feel a certain type of way. There was a curiosity component to it, but I also was fascinated with the female physique. So very early on, Nate, I learned a behavior that you see, I think, consistent with all addicts, and that is the ability to hide things and live a double life. Yeah. I mentioned the age and the timing of that because I didn't have access to the internet, like real streaming internet and even mobile devices with internet on it, until I was already in my 20s. But despite that, I still became incredibly addicted to the dopamine, to the escape. In my early 20s, I was a traveling sales guy. I was on the road a lot, working 60, 70 plus hours per week. But I would find myself taking what would be like, quote unquote, bathroom breaks to go and relieve myself. So I didn't realize it at the time. I was seeking stress relief. I was seeking escapism because I had a very high pressure sales job. I was running from a lot of pain that I had in my youth. So through my 20s and 30s, porn became an escape tool for me. And then I reached a point in my mid 30s where life on the outside looked really, really good. I was a well-known and recognized bodybuilder in the local community. I had a great, on the outside, social circle. I was connected with a lot of high profile people. I was very successful in business in a lot of areas. I had checked off most of the goals that I set for myself at that point. But when I looked at myself in the mirror and when I was alone, I was empty. And I really started to find myself escaping into some very dark places. And I think a real aha moment for me was when I closed the computer one night and I was kind of disgusted with what I had just watched. And I don't want to get too graphic here, but I found myself watching things on the internet that if I was in the room while it was happening, I wouldn't be comfortable in those situations. Yeah. Now, it was never anything that was illegal or anything that was overly abusive, just things that, because I became so desensitized to normal pornography or normal connection between two people, I was exploring things that were really dark. And this is consistent in a lot of addiction world, the desensitization effect, right? So there was a moment where I realized like I'm avoiding social circles. I'm skipping out on hanging out with friends. I'm skipping out on going out on dates. I'm completely disconnected from the people in my life. And I was aware of all this, but I wasn't able to connect the dots until I heard a podcast, I think with somebody that you guys are very well connected with, Michael John Cusick, author of Surfing for God. And I think what Michael's first podcast that I ever listened revealed to me is I wasn't alone in this fight. All of the stories that Michael shares in the book, what he was sharing about his own journey, it was like, okay, here's another guy that was successful on the outside, that was a family man, that was a business guy, but still had these secrets that were hiding in shame. So it kind of gifted me a source of hope that, hey, you're not broken. Like, yeah, you've gotten to a place where things are off a little bit, but there's a pathway out of this. Now, around that same time, Nate, I joined some internet online marketing masterminds. And this is crucial because this was the first introduction to what I would describe as kingdom driven men. I didn't know at the time I was joining like a Christian group, but the vast majority of these guys were very kingdom driven. They led with Christ centered values and principles, and then they were very well successful in business. Now I went there to get the business tips, but through the back door I was introduced to Christ, and it was very influential because I saw a different type of man, a man that would accept you for whoever you were, a man that led with his heart first, but also had a lot of the same traditional values in life, business, being fit, being strong and masculine. So this was around the summer of 2017. So I was in this group for a little over a year and a half. By 2018, October, one of those individuals I grew very, very close with. He still today is my best friend and a mentor. He was in Florida for a business event. We met up on Church Street, nonetheless, in downtown Orlando. I surrendered my life to Christ. It had been, a journey where I saw God kind of leading me down this path. And with Josh standing there by my side, I surrendered my life to Christ. So pairing all this together, understanding what Michael was doing, beginning to kind of go down and understand the neuroscience of it, and then a full surrender of my life to Christ was kind of like the recipe that I needed to really begin to attack this thing. So 4 months later, February 14th, I really confronted the addiction for the first time. At this point, I was ready to share it with somebody else. And I think that was a pivotal moment because there was so much weight that I was carrying. But the minute I was able to look somebody that I cared for and respected and say, hey, this thing has had a grip on me, but I'm committed to getting out of my life. There was like this, not weightlessness, but like this pressure released off of me. And I think that's important for guys to know is like, you need to find somebody that you can entrust in and at least share it with. You don't need to have all the answers right out of the gate, but get it out of the darkness and begin to shine some light on it. So that was February 2019. And that was the last day I ever looked at porn. And like I said, it wasn't a perfect, easy journey from there, but having a strong community, having what I needed in Christ, having tools and strategies from my own background and experience and discipline and identity work and personal development, those were core components. But, 6 months or so, goes by, I'm walking in absolute freedom. And that led me to the podcast, which is what I kind of shared with you in the beginning.
What a powerful story of change and transformation, and yet how God used your unique wiring, your unique experience to play into all of that to bring you to where you are today and the impact that you're making. I love how God takes our gifts, our story, who we are, how we're wired, and gives us a platform that we can use for him or we can use for ourselves. And I think one of the things I love about what you guys are doing is you really are talking about faith. It's not front and center. So it gives you an opportunity to impact and reach a lot of guys that maybe get in a conversation and begin to go, oh, that's not a part of my journey. And then they're open to being able to talk about it and really wrestle with where does their identity come from and who does define that? Because as Christ followers, we know who defines our identity. But a lot of people, they're looking for that purpose, that identity in their performance and what others say about them. And you guys are kind of bringing it about the conversation about pornography and addiction and then going, oh, here we are as a window to look and evaluate all your life and go, what is it that I need to change and need to transform? So love what you guys are doing in your own journey. Did you find that when that door closed to pornography, that new things became issues that you had to wrestle with? Or was it, man, I began to just find freedom in all different areas? Or was it, man, I could just look at this one area? Because I think so many guys can close the door on one thing, and then before you know it, oh, I realized there were other things that now I need to work on.
Yeah, I want to get to that, but I want to comment on your remarks there around kind of our approach, and not that we're left hooking Christ in anything that we do, but I wear my faith on my sleeve. Like there's no secret that I am a man of faith and a Christ follower. But I think yes, it enables us to reach the person and resonate with somebody that maybe doesn't have that background. But also, what it does, it allows us to connect with a guy that maybe has been guilted and shamed for years in the church. And
Yeah.
I don't want to call anybody out here specifically, but I'm sure you would agree, like the church hasn't done a tremendous job of solving this issue for men. A lot of, at least from what I've seen in my experience, and I don't have years and decades in the church, but what I see oftentimes, guys, how they feel the church is solving this is very shame based and guilt rooted. So we're able to reach that guy from a place of acceptance and love first, and then many times bring them back to Christ in a very healthy, transformative way. And I also think about my journey to finding Christ. Like I found guys that were Christian, but I didn't join a Christian business mastermind. I joined a mastermind that was led by a Christian.
Right.
And that transformed my life. And you know, I love that it's happening. I think that Christ is making a revival in the marketplace, and you see a lot of groups that are kind of Christian led first. But I got to remember back to like what transformed me is like I was looking for something in a specific area, but the guy that was leading that was a Christian, and he didn't like overflow it, but he wasn't also shy about who he was. And that was very approachable and acceptable to me. So I think it's enabled us to reach a lot of guys that maybe were disconnected from the church, but also the guys that maybe don't have that worldview. Maybe were me, maybe, you know, went to church a handful of times growing up. So they had sprinkles of it, but it wasn't a real part of who they were. So it's been cool to kind of see how we've been able to reach people that maybe wouldn't classically describe themselves as believers. In terms of the question of like, were there any new things that were kind of like, that I had to wrestle with? Honestly, no, because I tackled a lot of that in my 20s and 30s. There was a point, you know, when I was very young, like I was a regular everyday smoker. Like I smoked cigarettes when I was 21, 22, 23 years old. And I realized like how disgusting and destructive it was for my life. So I tackled that. I've wrestled with alcohol. My dad, I've seen him fight some demons my entire life. I saw a lot of men in my family growing up wrestle with alcohol. So it was something I was able to get my handle on, you know, not perfect, but I definitely wrestled with it and then got control over it. Same thing with drugs. I've done more drugs than I'm proud to admit, just from being young and dumb and kind of, jumping into the party scene and being very successful financially in my early 20s. I got a hold on that. A lot of what saved me from those things were the bodybuilding disciplines, were the identity transformation that I had to go through. So to become successful in bodybuilding, you have to go through the same type of identity transformation I believe requires freedom from addiction, right? So it's like you have to start to eat not for a goal in mind, but eat as a lifestyle. Well, a lifestyle in my mind requires a new identity. You have to decide that you're going to go to the gym no matter how you feel emotionally or physically. That's an identity transformation. And the same thing was required for me when I transitioned from the corporate sector into getting into entrepreneurship in my early 30s. It's like you have to begin to see yourself as a different person. So a lot of like the belief systems and identity transformational work were already embedded into me. I think what took me so long to get free from porn is for a long time, I didn't even see it as a huge problem. Like I grew up in the culture where it was just accepted. Like we joked about it in high school with our buddies. I saw my dad doing it. Society was like, oh yeah, porn is kind of a rite of passage for all guys. So it wasn't until I had those really like rock bottom wake up calls that I really began to address it, like from a very like committed approach. Yeah, there were times through my 30s in relationships, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to stop doing this. And then 6 months later, you know, I'm back participating in it. But a lot of like the principles of the identity work and the transformation that we use here today were things that I was working through in my 20s and 30s. And I think that's what enabled the organization to be so successful from the get-go. Is like it wasn't something that I was just trying to figure out on a whim. Like I had almost 2 decades of like real transformational work, both in my own life, but also in kind of client work and even in sales leadership, which I did in my 20s. Like you take somebody that's never sold anything and you make them a very successful salesperson, requires an identity transformation. So that's a lot of like the frameworks that we've used here. And then we've just been able to kind of really curate them to the guy that is struggling in this specific area of his life.
Thanks for unpackaging that, because I think so many people, you know, they want to understand more of what that looks like, and also know that someone's experience with freedom in all areas. And I can definitely see how these other areas allowed you to find success because you worked so hard, and those identities changed and were formed. And yet there was this one area that oftentimes, like you said, is acceptable. And then there comes this moment of realization. Maybe a guy's listening today and they're kind of still in that space of going, what's the big deal? This is, it's available. It helps me. It keeps me from doing other things. What would you say to those guys who go, yeah, it's not harming me?
I love this question, Nate, because I think there's a lot of guys out there that believe that. Here's a challenge, right? I can give tips and strategies. I'll present a challenge. If that's what you believe, right, and you hold your beliefs to be strong and you want to stand on them, accept a challenge. Because if it's not that big of a deal, then this challenge won't mean a whole lot to you. Commit to 30 days. If it's not a big deal, it doesn't have a grip on you, and it's not keeping you enslaved, commit to going the next 30 days without watching it. Here's my guarantee. One of two things is going to be revealed to you. A, if you try to commit to 30 days and you believe that it doesn't have a grip on you, A, you're either going to slip and fall back, right? Which should be a revelation that, hey, this thing that I said didn't have a grip on me has more control over me. So there's a sign that, hey, it's got some power over you. Two, if you do go 30 days and you don't go back and you begin to walk in what I would describe as real freedom, I can guarantee your life will change. Your mental clarity will improve, your motivation, your discipline, your drive, your sleep, your connection with other people in your life, your perspective of purpose and mission in your life will drastically improve. You will remove a veil, a dark cloud, shadow over your eyes that will begin to open up the world, and you'll begin to see it a whole lot differently. So it's not a tip or strategy. It's more of a challenge. If a guy is holding on to that belief, go 30 days, because one of those two things will be revealed to you.
Wisdom. Take the challenge if that's where you're at and you think it doesn't have a hold on you, because I agree wholeheartedly. You'll have some revelation at the end of those 30 days about where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned earlier the church and kind of how we've failed at times to talk about it, and we created shame and guilt around really, addiction struggles, especially in the sexual arena for men. I think about often said, you go to a church on Mother's Day and you hear, great, moms are awesome, we love you. And then you go to church on Father's Day and it's like, do better. You guys are failing. And how that can often be the narrative within the church, and a lot of that rooted in shame and guilt. What have you seen in accepting people and helping kind of remove that stigma around the struggle? And how do you guys do that so that it's changing the conversation? Because I think so many people feel like, well, that's the way you're going to get at the change, is making somebody feel shameful for it. And yet in the reality of it is, it's when you feel accepted that begins to open you up to the willingness to unpackage what's going on in your life.
Yeah, Nate, it starts, man, with what I said, right? And it's letting these guys know that there's nothing broken about you. I haven't seen a more up-to-date stat on this, but there was a 2019 Barna study that reported 56% of pastors and I think 64% of youth pastors have admitted to struggling in the specific area. Now, if you understand like psychology and subconscious programming and kind of people's projections, you'll often understand that the things that we say about others are oftentimes like a reflection of how we see ourselves. So if more than half the pastors that are standing on a pulpit on Sunday morning are internally struggling with it, they're shamed in themselves. They feel guilty. They don't feel qualified to lead it. So that's where their message is going to come from, this like, do better. Because what they're really saying is, I need to do better, but I don't know how to solve it myself. So it's not that they want to come with shame principles, but it's like they don't even know what to do for themselves. So they're really up there shaming themselves, and it gets projected upon the audience. What we've tried to do is, we do want guys to do better. We want to call them to a higher standard, but we want to do it in a way where it's like, I see the potential in you to be better. Like, make it specific. Like, yeah, you can say it on this path, like, and you can be successful on the outside and you can have secrets, but you know that you're meant for more. You feel it convicted inside of you. And here's what I see. And that's where I think sharing my story first, but then really providing a place where we can collectively come to guys and allow them to hear that from us, but also hear that from the other men in the community. You know, one thing that we are very adamant in doing is on all of our coaching calls, it's like if they're hosted on Zoom, like you have to have your camera on. Everybody's been in like in the men's group or like on the men's call where it's like half the guys are like sitting in the back and it's like they're just there almost kind of consuming. Well, consuming behavior is the reason why you're here. You sit behind the screen and consume an activity. You consume an intimate visual representation, right? So we don't enable that. So yeah, we're not going to shame them, but we are going to call them to a higher standard. But how we're going to do that first is we're going to live that out. You know, you cannot pass on to somebody that which you are not living yourself. So this requires me, and this has been the biggest blessing of this work, is like it forces me to walk in the standard that I'm trying to hold the other guys to. I know every single day that there is a community of men and an audience of men all around the world that are looking for me to guide them. Well, if I'm going to continue to lead them, I need to continue to be improving, but I also need to make sure that I check myself every single day. Am I walking in the integrity that I am telling these guys that they need to live in? Because if not, that message will quickly change from one of truth and authenticity to one of guilt and shame. So I think a lot of what needs to happen is the leadership and the men that are carrying this message need to actually begin to walk in their own truth and authenticity. So, you know, I don't know how we do that other than continuing to have these type of conversations and continuing to rise up ourselves first. Because as I get to know you, like if I see that Nate is living in an area that is challenging me, a part of me, like the masculine part of me, like the testosterone competitive side of me is like, I need to do what he's doing because I see how that is leading to more fruit in his life. So I just think men need to be told that they're built for greatness. I think societally and socially and Hollywood wise, men have been suppressed. I don't think any of this is done by accident. So we have to disconnect from the narrative that is being presented to us that we're useless, that women don't need us, all these feminine principles or feminism principles, right? It's like, no, we need strong men. And it's been cool to see, you know, for me in 6 years of being deep in this work, that pendulum is swinging. Like guys are beginning to accept that call. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but I have seen the shift change in the last 6 years.
Is there anything else that you would say about masculinity that maybe you feel like needs more emphasis or is important for us to understand that kind of keeps us from that swing between passivity and the toxic potential that's there for masculinity? Because I think there is, like you mentioned, there's a swing, but are there anything you're noticing that maybe we're not fully embracing or you're seeing with the guys that you walk with that they really need spoken over them as far as masculine and what it looks like?
I would say the one that really jumps out to me, and I think it's something unique in our kind of recovery freedom space that we try to provide, is the importance of physical strength and physical development. You know, Nate, I found the gym at 15. I was an overweight kid. I was very ashamed. One summer changed my life forever because I was 14 years old. I spent the summer with my cousin who's a year older than me. So at 14, if you're hanging out with a 15-year-old boy, well, you know what's going to come with that there as well, 15-year-old girls. And I was embarrassed that summer because I carried a little bit of extra pudge around the weight. I had to buy my jeans in the Husky department at JCPenney's. I was ashamed to take my shirt off, and I got ridiculed that entire summer at the pool for being the only boy that wore a t-shirt at the pool. Well, you know what that did? Yeah, it shamed me a little bit, but it actually lit a fire inside of me that said, I'm not going to feel that way ever again. And by 18, graduating high school, like I was walking around with 6-pack abs and I was one of the fittest kids in the town. So it's like having that fire, but it also led me into bodybuilding, which I've shared before, was very foundational in my success in business, in my success in entrepreneurship, and very important in the success that we've done here today. So I want to see more men grow physically into who God has called them to be. Your body is a temple, right? That's what the Bible's going to tell us. Socrates said, "No man should reach the end of his life and not know that which his body is capable of." Right? It's the signature on my email, because I think that physical strength is a masculine gift and responsibility that we were all given. And maybe it's not going to be bodybuilding and getting aesthetically jacked, but maybe it's going to be mixed martial arts or taekwondo, or there's all these activities, but use this body. Like, that's what it was given to you for. So I think that's the one for me that really is like, we need more men to be physically strong and capable, not just for the aesthetics, but for the ability, for the longevity. We know the role that muscle mass plays in longevity, in health, in injury prevention as you age. All of these are core components, I think, of being a man.
I think that's so true. I know in my own life, it's also a great way for your mental health. I mean,
Yeah.
physical activity and what that gives you, and the
Yeah.
chemical releases in your body that happen because of physical activity. What would you say, or how do you guys help maybe men who have some type physical limitation that's preventing them from maybe doing some of those things, and yet they find themselves as a struggle, and part of that is due to a limitation that they have? I know some guys who have some physical limitation, and due to that, I think it actually makes this struggle with pornography often harder for them, because they have some of those things they can't figure out how to kind of navigate.
Yeah, well, the mental health benefits are one, right? But then also just the energetic release. You know, we live very sedentary lives these days, where we're stuck in these boxes of homes. We're sitting in front of screens. We go from one screen in the morning on our phone to the next screen, bigger, for work all day. Then we go back to another screen while there's another screen on the wall that's playing. Like, sometimes it's just actually movement, like physical movement and energy release, keeps you from feeling all tense at night. It's like, now I need a release. You know, for a guy that is like physically incapable, like, that's obviously, you're going to have to really kind of dive in specifically and work through any limitations. One thing we do in our curriculum, and it's a foundation of our daily 5 habits, is just getting outside and walking for 30 minutes. Like, leave the phone at home. So this is like a no phone walk. You get some physical movement out in nature. You know, right now everybody's having to deal with weather and kind of the challenges of all that, which I think makes it even better, because now you're doing a hard thing. Like, you're having to go outside and kind of deal with the elements, which is incredible for resilience, building discipline, but also building confidence. Is like, hey, I'm committed to doing the thing no matter what's going on outside. And the interesting thing there is with the phone. So there was a book, I'm going to forget the name right now, but I'll get it to you here. But they talked about a study that they did in New York City. So they had 2 groups of people, and each of these groups spent time outside in nature every single day. One group was able to bring their phone with them when they went outside in nature, and the other group was told to leave their phone behind. At the end of the study, the group that had to leave their phone out away from them and go outside in nature reported improvements in their mental health, in their anxiety, and all their depression as well. So it's like, sometimes disconnecting from this thing that keeps us connected to the world all the time is actually one of the best things that we can do for our mental health. So we'll start with just getting outside and walking every single day. Good. Let's aim for 8 to 10,000 steps. That'll double a lot of people's just total calorie output if they're not training. And then depending on where they are, you know, we have prescriptions of muscle building programs, movement, body weight. If you can get in the gym, go play pickleball. You know, I play in the men's softball league for our church. It's 12 weeks out of the year, maybe 16, of just getting activity with guys. There's the fellowship component. Yeah, some people are very, very, very limited, but for the most of us, there's something that we can do to physically move more than we are now. And I think that's the best place for anybody to start.
Yeah. No, that's good. You talk a lot about the physical side. I know it's important for you. You just mentioned softball. What are some new things you in the last few years you've been pushing yourself or developing in your own personal life? Because I can imagine just as a high achiever, there's something new you're trying to conquer.
Man, that's a great question. I was actually talking about this just the other day. So we interviewed a guy on the podcast who founded a company called NewFit, and they have what's called a newbie device. It's a direct current stimulation for nervous system training. So they have these little adapters that you attach like to specific areas within your muscles, and it sends direct current signals there while you're training, and it kind of improves overall neuromuscular connectivity and firing. And one thing that he was mentioning was the importance for longevity in a person's walking gait. And that really triggered me because in 2013, I hired what's known as a GOATA specialist, GOATA, greatest of all time athletics, I think is what that stands for. But what they do is they look at people's walking gaits and how your feet land on the ground, how your feet use the ground to move and accelerate you through time. Now, as somebody that struggled with knee pain for a very long time, lower back pain as well, going all the way back to my high school days. Like I saw a chiropractor in high school because I had lower back pain as being a catcher. So I always had massive issues in my lower back, knees, and hips. So I hired the specialist because what they were saying is they could change the way that people were walking and it would take away a lot of their pain. So I spent about 6 months and we started literally crawling. So he took me from crawling on the ground differently. And then in 6 months, reworked my entire walking gait. So now my feet, where I used to be way like open, toes like out like this, where it caused a lot of pain in my knees and hips. Now I walk with very straightforward, almost pigeon-toed type of feet. I stand pretty much closed-toed, almost pigeon-toed all the time. I use the outside of my feet a lot more than I used to. And all the pain that I used to have in my knees and hips when I squat has been gone. So that was something that for the last couple of years, I put a huge emphasis. As I hit 40, I want to continue to move. I want to jump. I want to run. So that's been one big one. And because of that, from December 2nd, 2024 to December 2nd, 2025, I did 365 days of consecutive outdoor rucking. So I had a 70-pound weight vest for 365 days in a row. I put the vest on and I walked outside for a minimum of 30 minutes. There was a few challenges because I did some traveling during that time, and I even went on a cruise. When I went on the cruise, I just backed an empty backpack. The cruise had a gym, so I would walk to the gym, put weights in the backpack, and then I walked around the track on the ship. But walking, movement, feet patterns, gait has been kind of a weird obsession of mine for the last couple of years. And that 365 days of Rocky, man, it was something that, like, I don't know how many people have done that, but it made me feel incredibly accomplished. Definitely changed the overall look of my physique. As somebody that had been fit and strong, like, it added a density to my upper body that I'd never really seen before.
I think there's going to be a lot of people looking at what you're talking about with walking gait now and trying to figure out what that means for them. And it piques my interest knowing for me, my lower back with some of the work that I've done in the landscape industry in the past. I'm like, man, I definitely can feel that at times. And my biggest thing and my thing that I have to work at is the mobility, flexibility portion. I don't mind getting in and pushing the weights. And I know the older I get, the more important that is. And that's the one that's so hard for me to stay disciplined in, because I'm like, it just feels like you're not doing anything.
Same. I've always wrestled with that, man. And I'll do the bare minimum of mobility work at the beginning and end of a workout just because I know I need to do it. But it's definitely the one area where, like, if I'm limited on time, I'm skipping that still to this day. And admittedly, I know it's not the best thing for me. I have a lot of, recovery protocols that we do. We have sauna here at home, so I'm in there daily. Become a big fan of the cold plunge, ice therapy. Trying to train outside of, like, the traditional way I did for a long time. Like, I was a bodybuilder. I was all about putting on as much muscle as possible. But these last couple of years, it's been more athletic performance. I still love to lift heavy. I still want to be jacked. I want to be very, very muscular, but training now for like longevity and still being able to go out and swing a bat and dunk a basketball are two high priorities for me. But yeah, check it out. Go to GOATA. If you Google them or look them up on Instagram, you'll see they have a lot of practitioners and technicians. It's cool because they do these movement breakdowns. Like I saw one recently of like Tom Brady and Michael Jordan, and seeing how similar those two athletes that were in two different generations, two different eras, two different sports, like the way that their feet land. To me, it's become a weird obsession. Like I'll sit in an airport and just watch people walk by and be like, that guy's got knee pain. That guy's a former runner. That guy can jump really, really high. You begin to kind of see things in people just based on how their feet hit the ground. It is so fascinating to me.
Well, Frank, you've talked about some of the changes that have happened since finding freedom. What are some of the other things that you look back over the last several years and like the blessings in your life of where you are today? And then maybe one of the big challenges over the last 5-6 years?
Yeah, man. I think the blessing, and you may relate to this, when you start a podcast and, you start kind of sharing, these type of conversations, you don't feel worthy of, talking with, some people. Yeah. It's like, I remember early on, I was like, I'm interviewing my buddies and people that they knew, but Nate, I have been more blessed beyond describing here, like with some of the people that I've been able to sit down and connect with and relationships that I've been able to build. I mean, I've spoken with the world's experts in neuroscience, behavioral psychology, biohacking, fitness. Like we have an incredible lineup of 322 episodes on the Superhuman Life podcast that literally I describe as like a master's level degree in all these specific areas. So that's been the biggest blessing for me, is doing something that I'm so passionate about. Like I've always been a junkie for knowledge and information. Like I've read, close to 1,000 books. I've spent, upwards of 6 figures on personal development and masterminds and courses. Now I get to talk to the people that I've been studying for almost 2 decades. Like that is a blessing in and of itself, and something that I hope I can continue to do no matter what happens in coaching and business for me. Like I just love talking and getting my questions answered. So that's been the biggest thing. I think the challenge, has been, one of them has been just reaching the guys that I know need help. Like when I started this, like there was so much pushback. Porn addiction isn't a real thing. What are you talking about? Like it's just fun and this and that and da da da. Those aren't the guys. And I thought early on, like my job was to try to convince people that they had a problem. And I would come at a lot of my content and I'd get in the comments and I'd argue with people. I'm like, Frank, you're fighting the wrong battle here. Like continue to do what you do and know that there's guys that are looking for it. Competitively, like business landscape wise, like I started 6 years ago when there were like 3 of us. Like I still know those guys. It's almost become like a new get rich opportunity. I think for some people, it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of money to be made in quitting porn. So I see a lot of unqualified people trying to lead the charge, which I'm never to discredit or try to hold somebody back from doing something that they feel qualified or called to do. But I do think that the barrier to entry with coaching is very, very low. And I think what that's done is that's made the marketplace very hesitant to like the real people, like the real people that are qualified to help people now have this, like they're wrapped up with a lot of people that aren't qualified. And if you had a bad experience with one coach, sometimes it prevents you from actually seeking and admitting that you need help with other people. So that's probably the biggest struggle, like challenge wise. Algorithms have changed in the last couple of years, which has kind of blunted some of our messaging growth. But we're fighting through it, man. And, I think for me, knowing that this wasn't something I ever set out to do, that this is the calling that God has placed on me, is like what I need to remind myself every single day, despite the challenges of building business and roadblocks and stuff like that. It's like, no, God's calling you here to continue to follow the path and have faith that he's going to take you where it is you're trying to go.
Is it that calling that keeps you motivated to continue the conversation? Because I think sometimes you, especially if a platform is rooted in one thing and you're like, well, I'm done with pornography. I have to continue to talk about it. Is that calling what continues to motivate you to go, man, I'm going to continue to answer those questions, engage in those conversations?
100%. And yeah, I'm glad you said that, because there have been moments where like I'm having the same conversation with a guy repeated. I was like, almost like, why aren't you getting this? Like, like what are you missing? So it definitely has been the calling, but it's also for me in the last 4 years, like it's kind of gone a little bit deeper into what you would maybe say the fight for humanity. One thing that we did about 4 years ago is we partnered with a couple anti-human trafficking
Yeah.
organizations. And when you really get exposed to like the darkness of the world,
Yeah.
it's hard to walk away
Yeah.
from some of that stuff. So knowing that, yes, we're saving men's souls, right? We're transforming men. The great friend Sathya that says, change the man, change the world. So we're doing incredibly offensive work of like changing the landscape of masculinity and manhood in the world. But what we're really doing is we're really rescuing women and children. And that's the stuff that I'm like more passionate about, is like, there's some evil stuff that takes place in the world, and so few people are willing to look at it. So if I'm able to, with what we know and what we're not afraid of doing, like really enter in those dark places that very few men are willing to step into, then that's the bigger purpose of calling for me. So we need to do what we can do here on the front end, make the money that we need to support these organizations, but also find the soldiers that we need and then recruit them back over here. So it's kind of like we're fighting almost like two parallel battles at the same time. But yeah, they're both rooted, I think, for me, in mission and calling. Because I mean, it's not monetary for me. I can make a lot more money, like sales leadership, coaching in other space and stuff like that. So it's definitely mission rooted for me, and also knowing what freedom can really do in a man's life. Like, in freedom, I mean just truth. Like, if every guy that we knew walked in absolute truth and authenticity, the world would be a completely different place. So it's like, it's so much bigger than just this simple porn. It's like, I don't want to sound like I'm too big here or think too much of myself, but it's like saving humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you talked earlier, and you even, I think, mentioned it then, integrity, and comes from root word integral, one being, united, not double-minded, singular. And I think especially when it comes to pornography, you can so easily become two different people. That's one person in one space and another person to most everyone else. And most other addictions show in your life.
Mm-hmm.
We can think, and oftentimes it is true, others don't pick up on the changes in us if there's things going on behind the scenes with pornography. And yet, like you mentioned, that truth part, if you're divided, there's not truth there, because it's two different things going on that do not align together, because one person thinks you're this and you know yourself to be this.
Yeah.
And I think, like you mentioned, when you find that freedom in being who you are and not feeling like you've got to be two different people, whether it's something you're hiding with pornography, whether it's a shame that you're hiding from a insecurity, like you just talked about your childhood, like owning where you've been and what's formed who you are, and you step into who you are and who God's designed you to be, and you're confident enough to go, yeah, that was me. Yeah, I still wrestle with that, and be able to show those weaknesses, and yet those come together with, no, I am strong. God's made me that way. I can do this. I have achieved this. That it gives so much joy and excitement and passion and desire to live life to the fullest.
Well, I think it's that split identity that leads so many men to acting in a way that they would describe as self-sabotage, right?
Yeah.
They're preventing themselves from really being fulfilled in the success. They feel unworthy in maybe some of their accomplishments. We see it every day in guys that we work with. They're building big businesses. We've worked with a lot of pro athletes, like guys that are like at the pinnacle of their sport or the pinnacle of the world, yet they get home to their hotel room or they return home after the off season and they feel unworthy of the success.
Yeah.
And I think it's stemming from that double life, that double identity. James Clear has a quote in the book Atomic Habits: what you do when you're by yourself is really who you are. So So while nobody may know the secrets, they know them, and they know those secrets embedded in their subconscious. So when people are acknowledging them for the accomplishments, or they're telling them how amazing and successful or how great they can be, that little whisper inside of them, people describe that as like the enemy, but that's actually their voice talking to them. It's like, no, you're not, because we know what you're just doing last night behind closed doors. And it prevents them from really stepping in and really embracing the fulfillment of their accomplishments. And sometimes they'll get really, really close. This was me. Like, I would get really close to hitting massive breakthroughs, and then I would act out in a way where it almost felt like none of this, like it all came out of nowhere, but it was really me preventing me. I didn't feel worthy of that success. So that truth, that authenticity, like, allows us to step into a feeling of worthiness, allows us to step into embracing real confidence, like that I am here for something great. God's equipped me with all of this, and I am worthy of all of that. Like, guys don't feel worthy of great things, because once again, what you're doing when you're by yourself is really who you are.
Yeah. Frank, thank you for the encouragement, the challenge. I think we all are better due to the conversation that you are bringing to so many different spaces and talking about and engaging with. Thank you for joining us today and really sharing about what you guys are doing. If somebody's listening, they're like, I want some help. I realize that that's an area where I am very interested in what Frank is doing. Where can they find more information?
Yeah, I appreciate you, Nate. It's been awesome connecting with you here today and sharing this conversation. Guys can find me online on any of the social channels at Coach Frank Ridge. For a guy that is like ready to maybe taste what we're about, maybe not ready to go all in, but wants a little small taste of what we do. We have a free 7-day porn reset. It's 7 days of actionable tips and strategies. And when you enroll in this for free, for 7 days, you get access to our community of men, which we have a daily freedom call. We have weekly coaching Q&A calls. We have bi-weekly fellowship calls. So there's a lot that you get in this, free for 7 days. If you visit therebuiltman.com/7-day reset, you can enter in your information and you get access immediately. No obligation to stay. If you do stay past the 7 days, there's a monthly fee that's notched onto that. But at a minimum, join us for 7 days, see what we're about, start building some momentum, start getting a taste of our flavor of how we help guys transform. And hopefully we can, see you walk into freedom in, 30 to 60 days.
Well, I would say to anybody that's considering, you won't regret the fight. You'll regret if you don't fight. And consider it. Look at the resources that are out there. Thank you for what you guys are doing. Thanks for the conversation today. God bless, man.